Wednesday, Webinar Wednesday, shaping the way we teach English. Webinar course, shaping the way we teach English. Webinar Wednesday.
Welcome to Shaping the Way We Teach English, webinar course 15, brought to you by the American English team. My name is Jenny Hodgson, part of the American English team based in Washington, D.C. Welcome teachers who are joining us from all over the world. Here you can see the course 15 schedule. Today is the third webinar of course 15. So we still have many more sessions to look forward to. During these webinars, you will hear but not see the presenter. The way for you to participate is by using the chat box. This is where you can ask questions or make comments related to today's topic. You will also see the moderators in the chat box to help you, and we rely on you, the webinar community, to help each other. Your presenter may ask you questions in the form of polls. These will be multiple choice questions that will appear on your screen for you to answer. And we know that some people may experience technical problems, and unfortunately, we cannot fix individual technical issues, but we will let you know if we are having a global issue. If you do lose sound, a great way to follow along is with the caption pod that you can see at the bottom of the screen. Webinar courses consist of 6 webinars, and during the course, these webinars take place every other Wednesday. If you attend at least 4 out of the 6 webinars, you receive an e-certificate from your RELO or U.S. Embassy at the very end of the course. To ensure you are eligible for the e-certificate, we ask that you submit your attendance at the very end of the webinar. Please do not submit it before. It needs to be at the end when we request it. For individuals, we just need your email address. And if you are hosting a viewing session, meaning you have many teachers together in one space, then we just need your email address and the number of participants. Many of you are familiar with our Ning site, but if you haven't registered yet, you must register to join the site. Here you can find resources and discussion questions related to each webinar. You can also ask the presenter additional questions after the session. And this is where you'll find the pre-webinar readings and resources, and where you'll find the recording and presentation after each webinar so you can go back and watch it again. And I just wanted to tell you about a new section we have on the American English website, specifically for teachers. Each week there will be a different focus that includes an activity. This week we're focusing on conditionals. Who loves conditionals? I know I do. So check out the New Teachers Corner and let us know if there's anything that you'd like to see featured. Today's presentation is entitled Integrating Pronunciation Across the Curriculum. While it's natural to incorporate pronunciation activities into oral skills classes, many opportunities exist in reading, writing, and grammar courses to introduce and reinforce pronunciation concepts as well. In this session, the presenter will introduce content-based pronunciation activities that could be used in a reading, writing, or grammar course. She will give ideas about how these activities could be integrated to help students develop more clear and accurate pronunciation. Our presenter today is Shar Heitman, and she received a BA in TESOL and Spanish and an MA in linguistics with a focus on applied linguistics. She has taught EFL in Japan, Holland, and Spain, and has been an instructor at the American English Institute at the University of Oregon for 18 years. Her professional interests include oral skills, pronunciation, course design, alternative assessment, project-based learning, teacher training, and cross-cultural communication. So welcome, we're excited to get started with today's topic.
Thanks so much, Jenny. Thank you for the warm welcome. I am very excited to be here today with you all and be sharing one of my teaching passions, which is pronunciation. So you heard a little bit about me, and let's go ahead and get to know each other a little bit. We have a poll, and I'd like to find out about where you teach and what kinds of courses you teach. And I'm also interested in finding out if you teach only or are an administrator only, or if you have part teaching, part administrative duties. So, all right, great. And so it looks like a lot of people working with pre-teens and teens and university level or young adults, but we do have a few young learner. About a quarter of our listeners today are in the young learner or adults population. So yeah, we have a wide range. And then the courses you typically teach: reading, writing, speaking, listening, a lot of integrated skills I'm seeing out there. Great. Literature, cross-cultural communication, or content classes like business English. Or excellent. So it's like we have a nice range of people teaching different skills and different age levels. And then I see we do have a handful of administrator only, but some teacher administrator. Excellent, because at the end of the webinar, I'll be giving you tips about what you can do if you're a teacher, what you can do to integrate it, and also what you can do if you're an administrator. So, excellent. Well, let's go on. It was nice to get a little snapshot of who you are and what kinds of courses you teach and what age levels you work with. So I'm going to give you an overview of what I'm going to talk about today. First, we'll be talking about why. Why should we integrate pronunciation into all different classes? So as you noticed in the description, I talked about integrating it in reading, writing, and grammar. Certainly you can use any of the activities I shared today in speaking and listening classes as well. But I'm particularly interested in helping teachers see opportunities for weaving pronunciation into reading or writing classes or grammar classes as well, because I feel like often they think that that's not an appropriate place, or they don't see where they would have time to do it. So I will show you ways that you could weave it in places you might be able to have time to incorporate it in your curriculum. So we'll talk about why it's important to integrate it everywhere possible. Then we'll talk about which features of pronunciation are best to incorporate. And then finally, we'll move on to how. And I will be talking about 8 specific activities and giving some tips about how you could use these activities in your classes. So let's start with the why. Why should we integrate pronunciation into classes of any subject? And one reason is because of integrated skills. Even if a course is called reading or writing or literature, students still, in my experience and in my classes, they still do a lot of speaking in those classes. They have group discussions and group work. They might give presentations. They might write and perform role plays in a literature class based on a short story or a novel. or lots of different ways and in a writing class, they might be giving each other peer feedback. So we no longer are, even in classes in which are designated to one skill, there's a lot of speaking that goes on in these classes as well. Another reason is because describing my program, it is an intensive English program at the university level it's an intensive English program, and students do have 18 hours of class a week, but the way it's divided up is that they have 12 hours of literate skills, reading, writing, grammar, and 6 hours of speaking and listening courses. And so if we only introduced the pronunciation activities in the oral skills classes, and we also in oral skills classes have to talk about conversational interaction and discussion skills and many other skills, if we only introduce pronunciation there, we'd be losing out on 12 hours a week where we aren't weaving it in, and it would be a loss. And again, your program is going to be different ratios, but think about what percent of the classes your students take are more literate, skill-based, writing, reading, or grammar, or literature, and which ones are oral skills-based. Another reason why to integrate it into all different classes is because we have a captive audience. So pronunciation-only courses are rare, and some programs don't offer them at all. And so even if they do offer them and it's an elective course, something that students can choose to take and not required to take, it's better to offer pronunciation training in the required courses where we have the students already, instead of waiting for them to take it in an extra course. Another reason to integrate it into all the courses is demand. Students want help with pronunciation and intelligibility, and intelligibility means comprehensibility or ability to be understood. Students want it and need it. Another reason to integrate pronunciation into the curriculum, throughout the curriculum, is because pronunciation skills are connected to other skills. For example, pronunciation instruction has been shown by research to improve listening skills and reading comprehension skills. And so let me give some examples, or I'll give you a little bit of the background research. For example, Judy Gilbert, who wrote Clear Speech, which is a very popular speaking, pronunciation textbook here in the US, says students who are taught about English prosodic patterns often report improved understanding of speech on TV, in movies, and face-to-face conversations. Prosodic patterns mean things like word stress and sentence stress. I'll be talking more about those in a few moments. But the point is that students are taught about pronunciation patterns and have better listening comprehension. And then Linda Grant, the author of Well Said, which is a pronunciation textbook also used in the US, says that ESL, EFL students benefit from phonological awareness activities, or in other words, pronunciation activities, for clear speaking, listening comprehension, and reading development. So I'd like to say a little bit more about that. Why pronunciation and listening? Well, students, if they learn to say the word, then it will help them hear the word more clearly in spoken discourse. So if they learn a word in their head and they are pronouncing it incorrectly, then they won't recognize it when they hear it in spoken discourse, possibly. Whereas if they learn to say it correctly, then they'll hear it and pick it up when they're doing listening exercises or doing listening. And then pronunciation and reading, the connection there is that one of the skills we teach in pronunciation is chunking, or not to say each word individually and in isolation, and say each word alone and in a disconnected way like I'm speaking now. Instead, we group words into logical units. So chunking is something used in pronunciation, and they have found that students who chunk into meaningful units while reading show higher reading comprehension scores, higher reading understanding. We have a question. I am going to address a question, at what level should we integrate pronunciation? Well, personally, I feel like all levels it's appropriate, especially the young levels, when their ear is very keen at the younger levels, and they're able to imitate sounds and rhythms easily at the younger level. So my answer to that is going to be all levels. We're going to hold off on most of your questions until the end, but I did have a question coming through there. All right, another reason why to incorporate pronunciation into any class that we possibly can is that systematic spiraling and reinforcement is more effective than one-time introduction. What I mean by this is if you introduce a concept one time and then never mention it again, students will forget about it. But if you talk about word stress in week 1 and 2, and then again remind them in weeks 3 and 4, don't forget word stress patterns, and then mention it again in week 7 and week 10, for example, and give them a few activities along the way, it's more effective than just one-time reinforcement or one-time introduction. So a quick recap: why to integrate pronunciation skills into the curriculum is integrated skills. We do speaking in all classes, ratio of reading, writing to speaking courses, captive audience. We have the students in our class, we catch them where they are, demand, they want it, it's connected to other academic skills, and reinforcing multiple times is more effective than one time only. All right, so we've talked about why, and now we're going to do a poll just to kind of introduce the idea. We're going to start thinking about the idea of what. When I say pronunciation skills, what am I talking about? What skills? So we're going to do a poll. Don't worry if you're not familiar with all the terms. I'll be talking about all of them in a few minutes. But if you are familiar with them, go ahead and let us know which of the following pronunciation skills are you somewhat to very familiar with. Okay, you at least know that word, you've heard of it, you're somewhat or very familiar with. Great, I see a lot of people recognizing the word or the concept of individual sounds, segmentals. A lot of people know about word stress, sentence level stress. There are different words for that, different terms, but sentence level stress, intonation, excellent. Thought groups, maybe a little less. Linking and blending, the idea of connecting speech, and then rhythm. Great. So all of you are familiar. Excellent. I see a very high level of recognition with the concepts of word stress, individual sounds, intonation. Good. And then let's look at the second poll here together, if you wish. Which of the skills listed below have you introduced in your courses? Choose all that apply. So individual sounds, good. Word stress, a lot of you have already worked with that. Sentence level stress, intonation, excellent. Thought groups, linking and blending, rhythm, great. And then finally, which courses have you introduced pronunciation concepts? So very logical and natural to do it in a speaking listening course, but I see some of you are already doing it in your reading writing courses. Integrated skills is also very natural. A few in literature, that's wonderful. So excellent. So we'll go on and we'll talk a little bit more about the what. So what are we talking about when we're talking about pronunciation skills? So we've got the two main categories of pronunciation features or features are segmentals and prosodic features. So what are segmentals? Segmentals mean individual sounds. P, b, r, l, s, a, e, I, a. Okay, any individual isolated sound, phoneme, whatever you want to call that, individual sound, one sound. And then what are we talking about? What do we mean by prosodic features, prosody, prosodic features, or suprasegmentals? You might have heard that word before. What does that mean? Well, we're talking about word stress, for example. If you have a two-syllable word like mother, are we going to say mother or mother? Okay, which syllable is stressed? And we'll be doing some practice of this in a few minutes. So we have word stress patterns. We have intonation, which means is the tone or the pitch rising, going up, or falling, going down? Okay, intonation talks about the tone and the pitch of the language. Then we have rhythm. Rhythm is the melody of the language. So rhythm means you might be familiar with the term nursery rhyme, or in poetry, you've got rhyme, right? And so nursery rhymes are things like, twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. The idea is, what is the rhythm, what is the beat structure of that phrase or sentence? Then we have thought groups, which I talked a little bit about above, that we chunk words into, we group words together according to meaningful units. And then finally, we have linking and blending, which means connecting speech, making the words, one word flow into the other. We don't want to sound really choppy when we're talking. We don't want to sound really choppy when we're talking. We want to kind of smoothly link or connect one word or one sound, one phrase with the next. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of these features. There are lots of online resources. If you still have questions, there's ways you can learn about that. So in the past, back when I started teaching English as a second language many, many years ago, the approach for pronunciation was basically segmental training. We just did a lot of minimal pairs, light, right, or sheep, ship, or cheap, chip. Okay, so we would have minimal pairs and do a lot of work with that. And that's not wrong, but in recent years, there's been a lot of studies, a lot of research that has shown that actually, if you focus on prosodic features, word stress, intonation, rhythm, that is actually more effective in helping your students become more understandable, comprehensible, intelligible than segmental instruction. So if you're feeling like, well, you know, they're always going to have an accent, and even if I work on segments, they won't make a lot of progress, that's kind of true. They can make some progress there, but the great news is that you can work on these other features and make a lot of progress on their intelligibility, their understandability. So, for example, Derwing and Rossiter, who are very prolific researchers in the area of pronunciation and effective pronunciation instruction, they say we do not advocate eliminating segment-based instruction altogether. But if the goal of pronunciation teaching is intelligibility, understandability, then it should include a stronger emphasis on prosody. So basically what they're saying here is don't stop completely talking about minimal pairs and individual sounds, but focus more on word stress, intonation, rhythm to have more of an impact on students' ability to be understood. And finally, in the what is Stu Miller of Targeting Pronunciation, which is another textbook. And it occurs to me that I will be sharing in the resources, I will share a detailed bibliography that I have of all these various research references that I'm making, and also the names of some excellent pronunciation textbooks for your future reference. But anyhow, she considers these to be the 5 core pronunciation features. So intonation, and then she links rhythm and sentence stress, and they are very connected. Thought groups or chunking, linking and blending, connected speech, and word stress. And then finally, she says, deal with vowel and consonant sounds as needed on an as needed basis. So in an EFL environment, you have the advantage of probably most of your students are speakers of one language. So you can identify, oh, this is where Spanish speakers would have problems, or Arabic speakers, or Chinese speakers, or Japanese speakers. So you can isolate those sounds that are problematic in your language and then teach those on an as-needed basis. All right, and so now we're going to move on. We've talked about what, we've talked about why. Now we're going to move on to how. And what this is talking about, this is the Sells-Murcia framework that they suggested and that they advocate, and that there are different stages and different types of activities we can do with students. So first, we want them to describe and analyze what's happening, and I will give you some examples of how you might do this. Just get them to raise their awareness of that a feature even exists. Until somebody draws your attention to something, you might say, wow, I never even thought about word stress patterns until you asked me to think about it. So draw their attention to it. Do listening discrimination. And again, we will be doing that in our webinar today. I'll give you some examples of that. And then there's controlled practice. So controlled practice would be things like drilling, again, minimal pairs, or word stress, da-da, 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 or having them, do controlled practice, or rising, falling intonation. Again, I'll give you examples. Then there's guided practice, which is a little more free than controlled. but you're still giving them some guidelines. Try to use these 5 words with this word stress pattern in your 1-minute speech about your hobbies, for example. And then finally, we have communicative practice, and that would be much more free and open. But you still remind students, don't forget this word stress pattern, or don't forget to use rising or falling intonation, okay? So what you want to do is you're looking at your activities, you want to make sure that they aren't just all falling into the stage 1 or stage 3. There is absolutely a role for muscle memory building, for drill and repetition, choral repetition. That is utterly, completely useful. But you want to try also to make sure that you sprinkle in some activities that are in the guided and communicative practice realm as well, if at all possible. So analyze your own teaching practices and think about where gaps might exist in your teaching. All right, so let's move on. So now we're going to jump into the 8 activities of how can you do this? It's one thing to talk about do, and it's another thing to show you how to do it. So let me tell you about the context. All of these activities are going to be examples that could be used in a content unit about the environment. Okay, just randomly pick the environment. That is a unit I tend to cover when I talk, when I teach, but it depends on the course, of course. And there's certainly all of these examples could be translated to a different theme or topic, but I'm just giving you examples of the environment so that you can see how might you weave it into a content-based unit. So speaking of topics and themes, if you could in the chat box right now, share with us what are some of the themes or topics you work with in your classes. For example, art, family, sports, films, okay, I see. Environment, nature, animals, education, food, yep, that's very popular. Family, excellent. Hobbies, yeah. Everyday situations, whoa, it's going fast. I'm catching some animals, women, culture, family, world history, jobs, job interview, excellent. Clothes, media, wow, death, yeah. Curriculum, sports, cinema, so lots of different topics. So the point is that if you don't do the environment, don't worry about it, but just look at my examples and think about how you would translate my examples into your setting with your topics that you use, okay? Okay, so let's move on. Let's get right to our first activity. And the first one I'm going to deal with is word stress. So word stress patterns. So as you, well, let's talk about a definition first. Length, strength, volume, and pitch. This means that stressed syllables are longer, they're stronger, louder, and higher pitched, right? So if we say, for example, mother, right? Ma, the syllable in that is going to be longer, stronger, louder, and higher, right? Mother. We don't say mother, right? It's not at the same pitch. It's mother, right? It jumps up slightly. All right. So let's look at this activity is going to be that you would introduce your students to a word stress chart, a possible chart of word stress patterns, and I'll go over it together, and then we'll do a little bit of practice applying it. So if you were to introduce this to your students, if you have photocopier, you can make this on your own and copy it. If you don't, that's fine. Have your students, if they have paper and pencil, have them make this chart, and then they'll learn a lot in the process too. I actually give my students, they have 1 page for each pattern. And why? Because over the course of my term, I want them to chart lots of words, not just a few, but this is to give you an example. So let's just go over it and do a little bit of practice. You can do it silently on your own as I'm doing it out loud. So the top left corner is a 1-syllable word. So find, see, play, write, read, draw, okay? 1 syllable, that's the stress syllable. No controversy there. Let's move on to the top row, the first, the middle and the last one. So the middle and the top right. So if you have a 2-syllable word, you have 2 possible patterns, right? You have, I'm going to use empty syllables, data, That's the top middle row or top middle box. And then you also have da-da, da-da, where the stressed syllable is second. So remember the top row, top middle, da-da. For example, mother, father, sister, brother, April, August, okay, da-da. Then you have the second pattern, da-da. Remind, invite, collect, correct, relax, review, July, right? So the idea is there's only two patterns that you have for two syllable words. Moving to the middle row, obviously if you have three syllables, you have three possible patterns. You have da da da, da da da, the first syllable is stressed, or the middle box there, da da da, da da da, and the last one, da da da. So the first one, you have an example like anyone, everyone, grandmother, okay? Middle box, Seattle, invited, included, related. So we'll come up with other examples too. And then da da da, understand, introduce. So those are some more examples. And then going to the last row, it's really extending the same principle. You have 4 syllables, you're going to have 4 patterns. I wasn't able to include it on here, but you get the main point. You have da 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 da, anybody, da 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 da, or da 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 da, da 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 da. So first syllable, second syllable, or third syllable, da 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 da. Institution, education, invitation. Okay, so let's do some practice. We're going to go to a poll, and you get to practice this. So the first one is, what is the word stress pattern of global? Global, is it A or B? Wow, you guys are good. Global, 100%, that's right. It's da-da, da-da, global, right? The first syllable is stressed more than the second syllable. So now, let's do another one, all right? What is the stress pattern of energy? Okay, here we go, good. Number 2, sustain, sustain. Listen carefully, sustain. Is it the first syllable or second syllable stressed more? As most of you are saying, almost 100% accuracy. B, sustain, da, da. Okay, excellent. You guys are doing very well so far. Number 3. That's okay. Yeah, we can. 3, here we go. What's the word stress pattern of climate? Da-da, da-da, climate. Excellent. So we have almost 100% at pattern A. Da-da, climate. Perfect. All right, so let's see, let's go on to number 4. What is the word stress pattern of, listen carefully, pollution? Actually, most of you were getting it right before I even said it. Pollution, da, da, da. So absolutely correct, and B, most of you have guessed that, B. Yep, there we got 100%. All right, da, da, da. So middle consonant, middle syllable is stressed. All right, let's go on to 5. Energy, da, da, da. Wow, you guys are quick. Da, da, da. Energy, energy, energy. Which syllable is longer, stronger, higher pitched, and louder? Energy, perfect, 100% at A, and that's what it is. Da, 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 da. All right, now 6. Great, perfect. Introduce, introduce, introduce. Which syllable is getting the most stress? First, second, or third? Introduce. Introduce, excellent. The vast majority, almost all of you are saying pattern C. And that is correct. It's the last syllable that is getting the most stress in this word. All right, we've got 2 more for you. Number 7, getting a little bit longer, 4-syllable word, environment. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Environment. And we have almost 100% at B, and that's correct. It's the 2nd syllable. And then let's go on to our last one. Perfect. Sustainable. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Same as environment. So sustainable. I'll have us stay here for just a second. You don't have to do anything with the poll, but just listening, if we had the word scientific, then that would be like the 3rd syllable is stressed, but sustainable, perfect, B. Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint. Yeah, so you would present your students, you'd give them lots of chances to practice just with the empty syllables, da, 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 okay? Sometimes what I'll do is after I introduce this, I'll go around the circle, I'll say, you do a pattern. Actually, I number these in my classroom. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So then I say da, da, and students say pattern 3, or da, 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 pattern 4. So in other words, they can communicate with me what it is. And then I have the students say an empty syllable one, da, 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 da. And everyone says pattern 9, okay? Or da, 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 pattern 6. You see what I'm saying? So you can have students practice with empty syllables first, and then you go on, and like I was showing you, like the practice that we did, let's say that you're again doing unit on environment or whatever, medicine, health, family, you're gonna have some vocabulary, right? So you have them chart the vocabulary in a word stress chart like this, you see? So that at the end of the unit, hopefully they're not saying global warming, they'll say global warming, right? So they will have more of a correct word stress pattern. So let me just read these for you. Find, bring, global, ozone, climate, reduce, sustain, energy, resources, oxygen, reduction, pollution, recycle, understand, introduce, generator, fluorocarbon, ecosystem, environment, renewable, sustainable, scientific, deforestation, okay? So there's several things you can do with this. As I said, I really have my students chart many words, not just the environmental unit. The next time I have them chart more words and more. So over time, they're gonna be able to go home. You can say, go home and practice this, DACA, global, ozone, climate. That's something they can do on their own. If they're pretty confident, if you're pretty confident that they understand the concept. And then another thing, I don't have a lot of them there, so it's hard to make big conclusions on this, but over time, you should see that on the top row, the middle box, and the last box on the top row, the middle box, you're gonna get many more nouns and adjectives, right? Sunny, helpful, okay? So you're gonna get lots of nouns, sister, brother, father, mother, classroom, student, right? So now the last one, the last box on the top row, you're going to get lots of verbs: reduce, sustain, invite, correct, collect, remind, review, okay? So then they can make a conclusion that in general, 2-syllable nouns and adjectives tend to be stressed on the first syllable, and verbs tend to be stressed on the second. Again, not always. There's frighten, which is a verb, which is stressed on the first one. And if you look at the middle row, the last 2 boxes, or the very last box, so da, 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 again, you notice how those are both verbs: understand, introduce, reinvent, okay? So not always, but often verbs are stressed more on the last syllable. Okay. So in other words, have students chart words, and not just for that unit, but for every unit, and then have them draw some conclusions over time, okay? All right, so let's move on, and now we are gonna do a practice and introduction with some segmentals, because again, It's not that segmental work is not useful. In fact, it can be very useful. It's just you don't want all of your pronunciation focused on segmentals. But we're going to talk about sound and spelling correspondences. So what this is, as you know, English is not a phonetic language. Oh, darn it. Unfortunately, it's not always spelled the way it sounds, or it doesn't always sound the way it looks like it should, the way it's spelled. So if you look at these words, and they are all the same sound, or at least in American English they are. You might have regional variations in your dialect, and that's fine. Don't just teach the dialect and the accent that makes most sense in your context. But if, for example, for me, for American English, my students, this will be helpful for them. You have the sound, and look at how many different ways it can be spelled. Nature, world, dirty, conserve, journalist, dollar, and research, okay? So you would give them a chart, and you would say, okay, which one is nature? So second box on the top. World, the last box on the top. Conserve, the first box, okay? So you have them chart the words. Even though they're spelled differently, they sound the same, but what are the different spellings for You're raising their awareness. So now, over time, again, you would have them keeping track, keeping a log, charting this. Conserve, river, certain, university, controversial. Turn, nature, during, purpose, burn. Stir, fur, dirty, thirsty, girl. World, attorney. Journalist, journey, encourage. Herd, research, learn. Dollar, sugar. So then again, over time, here there is enough there's not a ton of evidence, but just looking at this chart alone, you could conclude that the most common spellings for the sound are ER, UR, and IR. And then OR, UR, EAR, and AR are rare. AR is extremely rare. Most of the time in English, you're going to have star, bar, car. AR is going to be pronounced R, not but you have a few odd exceptional words. So the point is, again, if students chart this over time, they'll become more and more aware of different spelling patterns and spelling and sound correspondence. Okay, so now so that's sound and spelling correspondence. Now let's move on. We're going to do another segmental, and this is vowels. So I'm going to talk to you about the color vowel chart, and it's a method of teaching sounds of English with colors and words instead of symbols, and particularly vowels. You can find this a free resource at americanenglish.state.gov, etc. You can see the link there. We'll have that on the name as well. The authors are Karen Taylor and Shirley Thompson. And let me show you an example. What they've done is they came up with a chart that this is roughly, this is the American English vowel system. And they created a phrase which consists of a adjective noun pair, okay, except cup of mustard, that is noun. But it's basically, you have colors associated with that sound. So you have E, green tea, E, green tea. And there is an online, I'm pretty sure this is a free resource that you can click on it and it'll say the sound for you. So the students could click and repeat. Silver pin, gray day, red dress, white tie, black cat, purple shirt, cup of mustard, olive sock, blue moon, wooden hook, rose coat, brown cow, auburn dog, turquoise toy. Does anyone want to guess? Remember when we were talking about nature, conserve, journalist, world, girl, dirty, fur, burn? What color would that be? What words and colors? Purple shirt, that's right. So you can have students practice this. You can introduce the idea of the concept of color vowel chart. And then now we're going to practice. Let's give you some examples, some chances to practice this right away. So for example, let's look at the first poll, blue moon. Which of these words, it's more than one, any of these words could be ooh, blue moon, soon, rule, lucky, new, fool, and would. So which ones are blue moon? Okay. Soon, rule, lucky, new, fool, would. And then similar with green tea. Let's just go through the blue moon. So soon for sure, that is. Listen carefully. Rule, blue moon, rule. So rule is also spelled differently, but it's an ooh, blue moon. Lucky, nope, that's cup of mustard. And new, listen carefully. Does that sound like blue moon? I'm at the first poll, the fourth word, new, blue, moon, ooh. Does it sound the same? You should hopefully hear that it's the same. Blue, moon, new. Fool, absolutely, okay? So this is another example of just because the soon and fool are double O, rule and new are spelled differently, but they're the same ooh sound. And then wood, nope, wood is wooden hook, not blue moon. All right, let's go over to green tea. Excellent, I see that most of you got that meat and green tea, that's the same vowel. Sister, no, it's silver pin. Seam, is it green tea? Absolutely. How about peak? Listen carefully. Peak, green tea, peak. Yes, peak is also, it's spelled differently, but it's also a green tea word. Fill, good, fill is not, that's silver pin. And candy, okay? Candy, which is black cat. Okay, and let's go to the last poll. Final practice on this is white tie. That's the color and that's the sound. I, fine, perfect. Style, exactly. White tie, style. Light, I, absolutely. White tie, right? So notice that all three of these are spelled differently, but they're all white tie. And then we have mitten, absolutely not white tie. Mitten is silver pin. Kind is also white tie. And right is also white tie. So good. So that's what you can do with your students. And then when you're doing the reading, and let's say that your students say something like, environmental, and it should be environmental, then you can show them that, no, which chart is that? I mean, which sound is that? Environmental, and you ask them, environmental, which one is that? And it's red dress, okay? Okay. And so let's take, again, I'm a big chart person. I like, language has a lot of exceptions, natural languages do, but there are a lot of patterns as well. And so as we get our students to start noticing these patterns, we're not just giving them a fish, we're teaching them how to fish, to help them recognize the patterns, the larger patterns within the small pieces of language that they know. So you're gonna take this like world, purple shirt, CO2, blue moon, reduce, scientific, sustainability, reduction, cup of mustard, up. And we're again talking about, even though these are multi-syllabic words, many more than one syllable, what is the main stress syllable? What is the quality of that vowel? Conservation, sustainable, olive sock, ecology, oxygen, red dress, environmental, global warming, orange door, or warming, okay? And landfill, black cat, and white tie, environment, recycling, scientist. So again, I really want to stress a few things here. First of all, if your dialect is different, this is American English. If your dialect is different, teach what works for you in your context. And second of all, it may be trickier for you as a non-native speaker English teacher, but if it's possible for some of them, if some of the sounds are easier, work with the sounds that you do feel most confident with, and maybe don't, and steer away from covering sounds that you're not as confident about, okay? So it doesn't have to be perfect, but you can at least introduce them to the concept and let them practice if you feel comfortable enough with it. Okay, so another activity that we've got, now we're gonna go back to word stress. So in English, great news, there is an absolutely hard and fast, almost, I have not found any exceptions to this. There's a really clear rule with proper names. And I'm gonna let you try to guess what the rule is. What do you think the rule is? If you take a proper name like Barack Obama, Lady Gaga, Lake Victoria, Los Angeles, okay? What do you notice about which of the two words gets more stress? The second I'm seeing. A lot of you are seeing second. Yeah, the second one. And if, for example, we had a 3-word phrase, listen to this: New York City, Salt Lake City, San Francisco Bay, okay? If we have 3 words, it's the third. So basically the rule is the last word of the proper noun phrase is stressed. So, like, yeah, sorry, I didn't go to this first, but what do you notice? Most of you are noticing that. It's the last word of the proper name phrase gets the most stress. So what I do is I have my students, before I even talk about word stress or proper names or anything, I say to my students, okay, take out a sheet of paper and write down 20 names of famous people you know, okay? So, you know, Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, whatever, Charles Barkley, you know. Again, it depends on what they're interested in. So they'll write down a lot of proper names, and then you tell them the rule, and then they can apply it to their situation. So if, for example, you're doing an environmental unit, and they talk about, oh, Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring. This was a very famous book back in the 60s about the environment. And Rachel Carson was a famous naturalist. Michael Pollan is lecturing in New York City. Okay, he's a more current naturalist and journalist who writes about environmental issues. Michael Pollan is lecturing in New York City. Okay, or this is a classic. Henry David Thoreau wrote Life in the Woods about his experience living on Walden Pond. So in other words, if you're doing a reading passage and there's 4 or 5 or 10 or however many proper names in there, you can have your students underline it or circle it and then practice saying them with the correct word stress pattern. This is whether you're a native speaker or not. This should be pretty straightforward for you and your students, okay? And then encourage them 2 weeks later, 4 weeks later, 6 weeks, remind them, remember, it's not Henry David Thoreau, it's Henry David Thoreau, okay? So you can bring it up, you teach it the first time, but then keep mentioning it, because I can't imagine an English class in which you don't come across proper names pretty frequently, because language consistently has a lot of proper names. Okay, so hopefully that's clear how you could introduce that into anything, grammar, literature, reading, writing, speaking, listening. Okay, let's do another activity. We've got another word stress. This is acronyms, okay? Acronyms are things like, for example, USA, BBC, okay? So why don't you share an acronym in the chat box? What are some acronyms that you know of? NPR, excellent. RIP, yeah. UK, OK. BBT, CNN, UN, FBI, CIA, HP, yeah. ESL, yep, excellent. NYC, ATM, RIA, FBI, yep. NGO, excellent. UK, FYI, very good. ASAP, YMCA, perfect feedback. Yeah. Okay, so now listen carefully. What do you notice about the word stress pattern of acronyms? Which letter gets stressed the most? NBA, FBI, GPA, LA, PC, DVD. Last one, absolutely. So that's an utterly regular, almost, I don't think exceptions. I've never found one. So you can teach students this, and now when they're talking about it's the last initial in an acronym gets the most stress, again, whether it's 2 initials, 3, 4, ASAP, okay? So now you have students identify word stress patterns and acronyms in a theme-based unit. So if they're reading an article and they're talking about, an increase of CO2 in the atmosphere, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, NGO, UN, CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, LEDs, WHO, World Health Organization, okay? So you would give them, maybe they have a reading and some of these occur anyhow, have them circle it, have them underline it. And then when they're talking about it, there has been much more CO2 in the atmosphere in recent years. They should be able to pronounce that correctly, okay? So again, no matter of accent, this is kind of independent of someone's accent, whether or not they can stress the last syllable, okay? Great, so let's move on. We've got 3 more activities. This one is sentence stress. So word stress is about individual words. Sentence stress is which word in a sentence gets stressed. And the first point I want to make, very important point, is that we're just going to talk about basic stress, okay? Any word in a sentence can be stressed at any time depending on your meaning. But let's just talk about basic situations. So you've got content words and function words. The content words are main verbs, nouns, adjective, adverbs. They're the ones that carry the most information. Function words are things like pronouns, his, her, him, they. Prepositions, on, at, near, over, under. Articles, the, and. Auxiliary verbs, has been, would have. Okay, so the main verb would be would have gone. So gone would be the main verb. Would have is like an auxiliary. Or has been drawing, or has been swimming. So the has been are auxiliary verbs. They aren't going to get as much stress as the main verb. So the content words carry the information, the function words carry the relationship between the content words, or express the relationship. So the rule is that content words get stressed and function words do not get stressed, again, in basic situations. Of course, you can say, my sister went, but her sister didn't, and that's a pronoun, and that's perfectly acceptable. Let's just talk about general basic stress, not special situations. So let's practice. If you look at this sentence, my sister went to the zoo on Sunday. We've got a poll for you here. Which words in these sentences will get stressed? So we're going to go to a poll right now. Good. And that is, my sister went to the zoo. So listen to this. My sister went to the zoo. My sister went to the zoo. What do you hear being stressed when I read that sentence? My sister went to the zoo. Right, we're going to hear sister went zoo. Those are the pieces of the sentence, the parts of the sentence that carry the most information, right? Listen to how I say to the zoo, to the zoo. It's very unstressed and said kind of quickly and blended together. My sister went to the zoo. So yeah, sister went zoo. Okay, now the next one, we're going to do an environmental example. It's a little bit more complicated, and I'm going to take a drink here. There we go. Which words will get stressed in this sentence? And I'll say it, and then you can check your answers. The EPA has the goal of reducing greenhouse gases by 20% in the next 20 years. The EPA has the goal of reducing greenhouse gases in the next 20 years. Okay, so which ones are the content words? Which words are carrying the most meaning. So yes, EPA, goal, reducing, greenhouse, in years. The other ones, the, has, next, those are function words. They're not giving us that much information, okay? Great. And we have a final practice for this. The average temperature of the Earth has decreased steadily over the last 100 years. The average temperature of the Earth has decreased steadily over the last 100 years. So again, the temperature of the Earth has decreased over the last 100 years. Great, I see most of you getting this right. We're not going to stress the or of, a or c or e or g. Those are function words. We're going to be doing temperature, Earth, decreased, b, d, f, h. Okay, excellent. You guys are doing very well. All right. So what I tell my students, again, when they're reading out loud, or they're having discussions, or they're going to give a presentation, you want to tell them, be sure to stress the keywords more. Say those louder and stronger. So they're doing a presentation. They don't want to say, today I'm going to talk about the environmental problems in the world, right? No, today I'm going to talk about the environmental problems in the world. You see how you want them to stress and say more strongly and loudly the key content words, okay? And that way, so you want them practicing, de-emphasize the, and those kinds of words that don't carry much information. So my sister went to the zoo on Sunday. Or we did this already, but I'll show you the answer again. The EPA has the goal of reducing greenhouse gases by 20% in the next 20 years. And the average temperature of the Earth has increased steadily over the last 100 years, okay? So the point is, if they're going to interact with native speakers soon or someday, if they can emphasize the content words more than the function words, they'll be understood better. Okay, so that's a good skill to have them become aware of. Slow down and say the keywords stronger, longer, and more clearly, okay? Sometimes students talk very quickly and they think, oh, I'm very fluent because I talk quickly. But sometimes talking too quickly and not stopping to stress the really important content words can make them very unintelligible, okay? If they talk too quickly and they don't stress the content words strongly, they won't be understood. All right, 2 more activity. This one is about thought groups and chunking, as I talked about a few minutes ago, that this is the idea that we don't say each word individually and in isolation. We group words together, we chunk groups into meaningful units of language together, and to pause between units when speaking. So let's look at this, and we're not going to do a poll or chat box or anything, but just in your head, follow along and listen, and think about where I'm pausing. Listen for where I'm pausing, okay? So for example, global warming is the rise in the average temperature of the Earth's atmosphere and oceans since the late 19th century and its projected continuation. Okay, listen again. Where am I pausing? If you were a student and you had this paragraph on your desk and the teacher was reading and you had to write a line, a slash, where I pause, where would you pause? Where would you put the line? Global warming is the rise in average temperature of the Earth's atmosphere and oceans since the late 19th century and its projected continuation. Okay, let's check your answers. Global warming is the rise in average temperature of the Earth's atmosphere and oceans since the late 19th century and its projected continuation. Okay, and again, students are getting ready to make a short presentation or summarize a paragraph or something, or definitely if they're presenting, listen to the difference if I don't pause and if I do pause. Global warming is the rise of average temperature of the Earth's atmosphere and oceans since the late 19th century and its projected continuation. Is that easier to understand, or is B easier to understand? Global warming is the rise in average temperature of the Earth's atmosphere and oceans since the late 19th century and its projected continuation. Okay, so the idea is to help students slow down and pause and not read each word exactly the same, but chunk it into thought groups and into listening units. What would be a unit? And it's easier to process shorter connected units than to just listen to individual words said in isolation. Okay. Now, the one other thing I want to say about this is a little bit less regular than some of the word stress or like the word stress patterns or spelling sound or the acronym, for example. You're going to get some variation. Some native speakers might say global warming is the rise of Earth's average temperature of the Earth's atmospheres and oceans. They may not stop there. So you're going to get a little variation, but in general, you should have it should be pretty regular. All right, let's try another one. Since the early 20th century, the Earth's mean surface temperature has increased about 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit, with about 2/3 of the increase occurring since 1980. Okay, let's listen again. Since the early 20th century, the Earth's mean surface temperature has increased by about 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit, with about 2/3 of the increase occurring since 1980. So if we look at this, you're going to notice two things that I've done, not just the slashes, but also you see how I've boldened and made larger that one of the syllables in that phrase, because every phrase is going to have a stressed syllable at primary. Since the early 20th century, the Earth's mean surface temperature has increased about 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit, with about 2/3 of the increase occurring since 1980. Okay. Okay, so there we go. So hopefully you can see how you can do a reading, or students can listen to a TED Talk, just a few minutes of a TED Talk. You as the teacher, there are like TED Talks, there's lots of resources out there that students can listen. You give them a transcript and they mark the pauses. Actually, I do this with a song. I do it with Beatles songs. I do it with all kinds of songs. Songs definitely pause, and they pause usually with the thought groups. Okay, and finally in poems as well. So finally, I'm going to do one on intonation, rising and falling intonation. So let's just do a quick definition here, explanation. So falling intonation means that the pitch falls at the end, and we tend to use falling for statements and WH questions. So let me give a few examples. Statement: she's a doctor. They live in Canada. We went to the movie. Okay, statements. WH questions: where do you live? Why did you go there? How did he do it? When did he call you? Got it? So in general, basic intonation for falling is statements and WH questions. Now we have rising intonation. Rising, the tone and goes up, the pitch goes up. So yes, no questions. Is he a student? Did you like the movie? Did you get a good grade on the quiz? Do you have a pet? Okay. So, and then we also have doubt, like he got an A on the test, or like you don't really believe it, or I don't know. Let's see. So something doubt or surprise. For example, you went to India last year, or you went to Hawaii at Christmas, or she's going to have a baby, or she's getting married, or he's a grandfather. Okay, so surprise. And then we also have rising and falling with lists, two or more things. So we have, do you like coffee or tea? Do you like milk or juice? Or longer lists, would you like a cup of tea, coffee, water, or juice? Okay, so we have rising, rising, falling. Rising, 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 falling. Okay? And so let me give you an example. Do you believe the temperature of the Earth is rising? Do you believe the temperature of the Earth is rising? Why or why not? So we have rising, rising, falling. And then WH question, what do you think is the biggest environmental problem today? Falling, because it's a WH question. And 3, which is a bigger problem, water pollution or air pollution? Okay, with a list, so up and down. So for example, your students read a passage and then they're going to get into groups and ask each other discussion questions. Why not teach them the intonation pattern of questions? And so they can apply that anytime they're in group discussions, right? Or let's say they do an interview, they're going to interview each other. What are your 5 favorite hobbies? You know, do you like watching movies? Do you like listening to music? Do you like reading? Do you like sports? Do you like, right? So teach them the rising intonation and then have them write a little survey for each other, or teach them the falling intonation. You know, what does your father do? What does your mother do? Where do you live? You know, so, all right, excellent. So there's lots of places that we put questions in our classes. Doesn't matter if it's reading, writing, grammar, speaking, listening, literature, content, business English. Teach them this and then have them practice it. All right, so that's what I'm saying is practice and remind students to use intonation patterns in group discussions or pair work activities. Yeah. So finally, in conclusion, what can you do to improve your ability to incorporate pronunciation in the classroom? So I'm going to give you some closing tips and food for thought. All right, so first of all, on a personal level, you can recognize, create, and utilize opportunities for pronunciation instruction and practice. So just think about, where could I put pronunciation in this lesson about hobbies or family or environment or art or history, okay? You could, just like I just showed you, 8 activities, you could be thinking about, where could I put it in a small way? They're going to do the activity anyhow. How could I give a little pronunciation tip and have them practice that as they're doing the activity? Personal level, raise your awareness of main pronunciation features. If there were some terms today, word stress, intonation, rhythm, linking, blending, learn more about them. There are lots of free online resources that you can use, books or colleagues, you know, talk to somebody, raise your awareness, educate yourself. Personal level, contextualize activities as much as possible. Again, remember the Salesmercia framework, that the last one, stage 1, listening, and 1 is description, 2 is listening, 3, drilling, 4, controlled practice. But the last one is communicative practice. So contextualize it, activities as much as possible. Like I just gave that example. You're going to ask your partner 5 things that they like to or not to do it. So do you like swimming? Do you like reading? Do you like, and then, so give them a real context as much as possible. Or they're going to write a role play and interview a scientist about global warming, and then remind them of some of those word stress patterns, rising, falling, etc. So drilling has its place. Just idle drilling, that's fine, but then move to meaningful language as much as possible. Okay, and then personal level, provide regular on-the-spot pronunciation feedback to students in all classes of all skills. So after you've taught acronyms or proper names or word stress pattern, and they say sustainable, and you go, oh, is that sustainable or sustainable? And then so give them feedback. Even if you didn't teach word stress for a few weeks, try to go back and give them feedback. Personal level, encourage students to practice outside of class. So are there any native speakers they have contact with? Assistant teachers or tourists, I don't know. Or do they travel outside of your country? If not, that's fine too. Have them go home and practice the word stress patterns. Have them practice green tea, silver pin, red dress, gray day. Have them practice rising or falling intonation. And have them listen to movies, and they can follow, or BBC or Voice of America, and they can follow along and try to imitate the speaker. So they can do that. And educate yourself. Take a course, take a workshop, learn about online resources, get involved in professional organizations. So it's great you're here today, so that's one step. There's other webinars I've noticed on the recorded webinars pages of past webinars that also talk about other pronunciation features. So, and provide students with online resources and information to practice pronunciation outside of class. So, yep. I can also share on the Ning, I will be sharing a list of some of the resources that I use to refer students to. All right, and finally, also, if you are one of those people that in the beginning answered the question that you're part teacher, part administrator, or if you have a really good relationship with one of your administrators, or you have a connection with one of your administrators that you can talk to about this, what can you do on an institutional level? So I don't know what your program is like, but let's say there's 3 classes in listening and speaking, beginning, intermediate, and advanced. You could talk about, hey, let's use this word chart in all of our courses, or let's use it at the intermediate advanced level in these particular ways, or let's use the color vowel chart. So you can do it in your own classes if your institution allows, but try to think on a more institutional level. What could you do? Institutional level, you could also include pronunciation goals and curricular objectives for all classes. So let's take a literature class. Of course, they're going to learn about poets or different rhyming schemes and different, literature of different centuries or different people of different countries. But you could include pronunciation goals. For example, by the end of this course, students will be able to correctly pronounce proper names of poets and book titles, novel titles, with 80% accuracy, meaning they can apply the word stress pattern for proper names, right? So you could have curricular objectives for all your classes. You could also facilitate training and support for teachers. So if you're an administrator or you're a teacher and you want to give a workshop on this color vowel chart or word stress pattern or something. So speaking of professional organizations, which professional organizations are you a member of? I realize that professional organizations can be expensive. They cost money and we can't always afford to join them. But which one's Next TESOL and Raz TESOL? Excellent. Next TESOL. What other professional organizations? CCCN, great. TESOL, JALT. Okay. Hi, Renato. A student of mine from another class. All right, good. Okay, so we have, for example, TESOL. And then within TESOL, it's called Speech Listening Interest Sections, BLIS. Or within IATEFL, there's a PROMSIG. It's a special interest group specifically designated for discussing and disseminating information about pronunciation-related research and activities. Okay, so if you haven't joined or would like to join, try to find out. Yeah, CELTA, Delta. All right, so do we have any time for questions? I'm asking our moderator, Heather. I'm not sure where we're at. Sounds like we have about 4 minutes for questions. Yeah. I'm going to take a drink of water while I'm looking at questions here. Ooh, how to deal with pronunciation in large classes. That's an excellent question. I had meant to address that. What's the difference between pronunciation and accent? That's a good. How can you help students overcome mother language interference? So let me see. So dealing with pronunciation in large classes, you can do choral repetition and drilling. You can do small group work. Again, that word stress chart, da, 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 da. Hopefully, if you can designate a leader of the group that is pretty comfortable, pretty able to apply the word stress patterns, I would say grouping is a really good way, and whole class choral repetition. I'll put that word in here, choral. Oops, I'm typing in the wrong chat box. Ah! All right. Choral repetition, like, which means choral, oops, nut hole. So for large, very large classes. And I will be sharing a references page on the Ning. Okay. And should we incorporate pronunciation in every class? Yeah, I think so. Okay. Yeah, I was putting choral repetition in there because that's a little bit maybe hard to pick up. Let's see. In difference between pronunciation and accent. Again, accent refers to the specific dialect of English that you speak. So in British English, for example, they're going to say water, roughly. I'm not a British English speaker, but water. And then in American English, you're going to have water. So accent refers to the differences between different dialects, whether you say water or water, or city, whether you pronounce the T in city like the British do, or letter, or better, or whether you're going to say city, which sounds more like a D, or letter, or better. So that's accent. And then pronunciation, again, is these things that they transcend, they go above accent. So things like word stress generally are more universal. CIA. So even the British are going to, as far as I know, stress acronyms in the same way. So, oh, excellent. Assessment techniques, yes. That's a great. So you could do something like we did in this, this webinar. And for example, if you teach green tea, blue moon, you would have students circle all of the words that are blue moon or green tea, and with a certain percent of accuracy. You might not go for 100%, but with at least 75 or 80% or 70% accuracy, that they can identify at least 80% of the words or 75% of the words, or even half of the words, if they're really, depending on their level, what's appropriate for their level. Do you want them to at least recognize a few of the words? And another thing you can do in your rubrics, if you know what I'm talking about, rubrics, if they're giving a presentation, of course you're going to grade their content. How well organized were they? How much research did they do? Is the meaning of their facts correct, etc.? But you can also have a small component to assess their clarity, how well, their intelligibility. Were they very understandable? They stressed the key words. They put appropriate pauses. They stressed the words. They did the correct word stress most of the time, or not. Did they read each word in isolation for their presentation? Do you see what I'm saying? So, yeah, assessment can be done in many different ways. So finally, it looks like our time is up, unfortunately, but I look forward to continuing the conversation on the Ning. Our moderators, Jenny or Heather or Katie, can give you the Ning link. And I just wish you the very best of luck in recognizing opportunities and incorporating in pronunciation wherever you can. Best of luck. Thank you for joining us today. It was a pleasure to be here with you. I'm going to.
All right, this is moderator Heather. First off, I would like to extend a big thank you to our presenter today, Shar. She provided us all with lots of accessible and practical ideas for sprinkling pronunciation concepts throughout our courses, no matter what subject we might be teaching. Now is the time for entering attendance, please. We only need you to submit your information one time in the lower left-hand corner where it says submit attendance once here. If you are watching this webinar as an individual, all we need you to enter in that box is your email address, as shown in the first example in green on the upper left-hand side. If you are a viewing host, we'd like you to please submit only your email